Right, welcome.
Thank you.
We've been sitting here having a bit chat, and I hope we haven't took up all the topics of conversation that we were going to talk about today. But yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming. So obviously this is Space to Think, our first podcast. So I couldn't think of two better guests to have on for today. So Mark, Becci, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly and just say who you are, where you're from, and we'll get cracking.
Yeah,
Becci, you go first.
Yeah, my name's Becci. I am the head of School of Psychology at the University of Sunderland, and I'm an evolutionary psychologist by trade.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having us. Really appreciate it. I think it's an amazing thing that you're doing to start this. So yeah, my name's Dr. Mark Ord, and I'm an evolutionary psychologist, quite interested in male psychology, especially the mate selection, the mate success side of things, and how we compete for partners as well.
Amazing. So fascinating. So we got, I feel like we've been in touch for probably about, maybe 2 years, something now, a year and a half. And I think when we hosted an event last year, the Space to Think event, which was all about men and why men matter and why mental health of men matters. And that was a sold out event and extremely popular because of the content that is delivered and how fascinating the topic was. So I think today I'll be really interested to know a little bit more about that, because not everybody could come, and I think it's a really good subject for us to talk about.
Yeah.
But I think first, I think it's important that we understand who you are as people. So I'll ask, in the name of Space Northeast, how he's doing.
Aye. Can he? Aye.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, I am a relatively new father. I think that comes along with a lot of challenges, a lot of sleep deprivation, a lot of expectations on how people behave, a lot of juggling of various different lifestyles that I think probably a lot of the people who will listen to this will absolutely understand. So challenges associated with that for sure. But yeah, for the most part, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That was a good honest answer, that, Mark.
It's a really good one.
Because usually we ask people and they say, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
All good. Yeah,
But I'm trying not to do the stereotypical thing.
Good.
When people ask men how you are, and it's like, fine.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. There's a good thing that
honest,
that in a lot of the support services we run is we'll ask the lads how they're doing, and they'll list off for the next 10-15 minutes this traumatic story that they've experienced, and then at the end they go, but yeah, I'm fine actually, other than that I'm all right. And it's just this thing that men do for some reason. Nobody talks about it, but we all do it. Just go, yeah, I've just I've had the worst week of my life, lost my job, divorced my partner, but I'm actually I'm fine. It's almost like they're justifying it, they're okay.
Wow.
So good answer, thank you. Becci, so obviously you are the head of the School of Psychology,
Yes.
Sunderland University. Do you want to tell me a little bit about what that actually means? So what does it mean to be the head of the School of Psychology? Because that's a pretty impressive title.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of responsibility?
There is a lot of responsibility. So it was quite a quick progression for me, and I feel like it's something I'm still finding my feet in. So I'm supposed to be responsible for the kind of strategic direction of the school. And I've worked there for a long time. I worked my way up. I was, a casual member of staff while I was doing my PhD. I spent time as a lecturer, senior lecturer, and then associate head of school. During that time, I was program leader for our undergraduate provision. And there's something in there where you're program leader, where you get to have some kind of academic leadership over what the program looks like, which is nice. But then when you take that step up into associate head, you've kind of got oversight of that with your program leader, but you're also doing the people management. And then now as head of school, it's like trying to look at, what can we do? What can we innovate with? We need to kind of provide our core business, but we were chatting earlier on, weren't we, about the sector, higher education sector, and how it's so different and it's changing so rapidly. Trying to stay afloat in that and be responsive but proactive at the same time. So kind of all of that stuff, really. Yeah.
So, I think probably the universities in general face probably a lot of, I know particularly, I would say almost in working class areas, I think universities particularly face a lot of maybe stigma even to a degree, but there's definitely a lot of negative opinion towards universities. Do you think that's just because of it's an institution, or do you think that's, is there something more, I guess, fundamental, like fundamental underlying principles behind that?
I think there's something in that. Like you say, particularly around working class areas, I feel like there's a perception that like an us and them perception almost. That's not for us. That's where all those clever people go and stuff. We can't do that. And it's something that really attracted me to Sunderland, even as a student. When I first started, I was only 22, but I was considered a mature student, and I had 2 kids, and I only wanted to go to Sunderland because I thought it would be the most welcoming place for someone like me.
Yeah.
And it's something that I am really proud of with Sunderland, our commitment to working to widen participation. And I think there's work for us to be doing, to continue doing, around breaking down those kind of barriers around those misconceptions. Maybe it's about a year and a half ago, I went to the school my sister works in South Shields, and I did an event there with the kids, and it felt very much like taking that step, showing the kids when they're 13, 14 that university is in your reach. If it's something that you're interested in, it is obtainable. It's not just for those kids, it's for you as well.
That's such a good point, and I think it's probably part of why I wanted to do this podcast in the name of Space to Think, was because I wanted to try and connect I went to university I was in academia for 4 years, but I feel like I was given through my dad, who was fantastic in always instilling in me the sense of you can do what you want. Like, it's not, because what you've just said is that what he would say. He would say, it's not just for them. So university's not just for them. It is for us too. So I feel really grateful for that. Even though I didn't particularly enjoy university, I'm glad I had the it was instilled in me the belief that I still could do, and it was a part of it. I could go, and it was up to me if I did that, and it wasn't going to be somebody else's choice.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I wonder if if we look at the distribution of universities and look at the higher, I guess the highest performing universities, the highest quality universities, are they typically in the less deprived areas of the country, or are they in the most deprived areas of the country? Because if we look at deindustrialized areas like Sunderland, for instance, our university is an old polytechnic college, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Then you go down south and you've got Liverpool, York, UCL, London School of Economics, all these different amazing schools, and they seem to be occupying the more affluent, wealthy areas of the country.
Yeah.
Is that a trend that follows suit?
Yeah, so for the most part it does. So you need only look at the league tables for universities to see that the top 10, 20% of them are the sort of really old style, typically successful universities that attract a lot of wealthy students. It's fairly complicated because, the reality of it is it's expensive for universities to do what they do, whether it be teaching or research. And if you have a wealthy student body that's willing to invest in the university, then you are better placed to do things like research. So typically they become good universities and maintain their position, at least in part because of the circumstances they find themselves in that allows them to do things that poorer universities might struggle with.
Right, okay.
It doesn't necessarily mean that universities from poorer areas are bad. Like, for instance, the Times was the Times. It was the Times, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. So the Times university ranking system placed us, I think, as the second best university for student experience and teaching in the Northeast.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, so above Northumbria and
Congrats.
Newcastle, etc. So
Was that
yeah,
down to
so
you
it's-
two? Down to you two.
Oh,
Aye, aye.
it would be amazing if we could say yes. So it doesn't mean that say Sunderland University is a bad place per se.
No,
It just
definitely
means
not,
that the material circumstances are challenging.
Yeah, okay.
And that's one of the things that we've been trying to do recently is do a lot of outreach So we want to be part of the community. We want to do something that matters and is meaningful. And hence we find ourselves here with you guys. I suppose.
Good. It's a good start of I felt we've built a good relationship. We've built a good partnership through. That's so important, because I've really keen to understand through starting Space Northeast. I've really keen to understand the power of these institutions that exist, and it's almost like a monopoly to some degree. And I think one of the things I'm very interested in is doing things differently. So it's like, how can we do things differently as a collaborative, because I know the impact and the benefit that community-led support offers people, as well as in partnership with the clinical support that people are offered. Because I know that from personal experience.
Yeah.
How much, being in part, softer solutions like finding some purpose and taking responsibility for your own actions, they can be so powerful in helping to support yourself as well. So, I've got this real belief that, institutions like the universities working alongside community-led organisations, it'll create the biggest change, because those people like us, like other organisations all across the country, they understand the people that they're working with, and it's real work. It's walking the walk, they're not just talking the talk, which I've been aware that does happen a lot. But I guess so, thinking about research, what are the, you both are very heavily focused on psychology, obviously.
Yeah.
Now, what we're here to talk about is male psychology. So, Becci, I think we'll start with you. Like, do you want to tell us a little bit about what is the research and the topics you've been involved in around men?
Yeah, of course. So for me currently in my position, I keep saying this to everyone, I'm not as research active as I'd like to be, but something I can do in my position is cultivate a space for my team to be research active in this area. And what we've developed in the school is a little core lab. So it's a collaborative laboratory group where we've got staff with these research interests in male psychology, undergraduate and postgraduate students, and community organisations like yourselves who are involved in this. So we can try and develop a critical mass in something that's not just theoretical, but it is applied. Like you say, it's got a, and something, what you were just saying there about the sort of impact and the power of community groups, I think is so fundamental. And I remember, earlier in my career being at conferences and things and thinking, wow, the people on the ground, the practitioners and the academics, it felt like there was a huge gulf between them and they just needed to be able to link up. So what they were doing was more research informed and it could better guide what they were doing. But so for the academics, what they were working on had that real impact. So I feel like that's something that's really important that we're doing and developing. But my interest in this started off the back of my PhD. So I did my PhD in male competitive behaviour from an evolutionary perspective. And from that, I just was really interested in the fact that there are sex differences. There's clear evolutionary and biological sex differences that doesn't diminish anyone's experience or anything. It just is. And at that same time, I remember reading the Psychologist magazine, which is the magazine that the British Psychological Society produces. And there was someone in there, John Barry and Martin Seeger, who were in the middle of kind of trying to promote the idea of male psychology. And I contacted them. And so from there, I became involved with the male psychology section of the BPS. It wasn't a section at the time. It wasn't formally recognised. And it was all led and developed and created through John Barry and Martin Seeger. So then one day I'd gone into work and went, I'm just going to put forward, I want to do this option module. I've been sat around sort of waiting for them to tell me what they needed of me in my role at the time. And I just went, I want to do this now. For me, this is my interest. Here's an optional module in male psychology, so we have to take it through like a quality process, and then it's got to go to a board for approval. It was pre-COVID, so we were sat in a room in the board, and the first thing that someone said was, well, what about female psychology? I'm like, yeah, go for it. If you've got an interest in it, go for it. My interest, my research was very informed by testosterone and stuff as well. So I'm like, this is clearly where my knowledge comes in. If you want to do female psychology, I think that'd be mint. And no one ever did. And I just thought, it really signaled to us at that time this kind of us and them, and it didn't need to be. And I kind of caveat that with the students every year that like, I feel like we all need to be doing our own piece of the puzzle to be able to understand the human condition. And it's so huge and so vast. And we take a very UK-centric approach here.
Yeah, definitely.
We need to look cross-culturally, cross-species even. And there's nothing wrong with us looking at our own piece of the puzzle. It's an important piece of the puzzle. And if we pretend that those differences don't exist, then we take everything away that makes us human, really. And we consider ourselves as just this like big homogenous blob of sameness, and that's just not reality.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I've experienced similar in our work. You know, our work is we support men. That's essentially what we do in three words. We quite often when we meet people, they'll say, "Well, what about women? Why are you not supporting women?" I'm like, "Well, it's not. You know, I'm not a woman. I don't understand what a woman's experienced in her life. We support men because I understand those challenges more." And he says, "But women need help too." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not stopping you.
Yeah.
You can go and do that yourself. Like, this is the joys of what we do, and you know
Exactly.
that support can be offered. So it's that whataboutery, isn't it? It's
is.
like, well, what about this and what about that?
And it's
you see it on the news as well.
You do. It's such a dangerous position to get in, and I think it's so. Well, I don't know. You correct us if I'm wrong here, Mark. Right? It feels like a bit of a straw man argument to me. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it is, right? Like, look, you know, no one's saying that women don't deserve their own conversation. Of course they do, right? That's perfectly fine. But it is almost a distraction from the issue. I mean, you take suicide rates, for instance. It's predominantly male. I think it's something like
75%.
Yeah, 75%. So 3/4 of suicides are men. You look at the homeless population; it's almost all men. Like, it's fine to talk about, you know, women within the context of that conversation. But yeah, what we're interested in is men specifically. And I think talking about women is like you say, Becci, a distraction from the mission that we've got, which is to help guys, really.
Yeah, exactly. But that it's beneficial for everybody.
Yeah.
So, you know, the more we understand about the evolutionary history of males and females, and the more we understand about how those behaviours now affect us in modern day society and how maybe they do or don't fit that typically they did. The more we understand that, the better chance we have of assimilating is probably the wrong word, but you know, us becoming more, I guess, coexisting better. You know, I know there's a lot of because in the interest of balance, you know, while male suicide rates are astronomically high, 3/4 of which are male. You know, we've also looked at things like, you know, domestic abuse. You know, domestic abuse is massive majority perpetrated by men. So that's a huge issue. So there are problems that we've got to try and solve. Yeah. But I think we only solve that by trying to understand what are the behaviours and what are the underlying principles of, you know, why do people do this? Is it down to deprivation? Is it down to, you know, lack of opportunity? What is it? Upbringing, you know? So I guess, you know, not specifically domestic abuse, but I think if we look at what is this is a good question actually, and this is for you, Mark. What is masculinity? What is a man? Where do we start?
Okay. Yeah, that is a good question. It's a big question. So if it's fine, I'll just kind of give a little bit of a background.
Please.
So being evolutionary psychologists, we're interested not just in the social factors that impact the origins of behavior, but also in the biological factors which impact behavior. So just very, very briefly, the base premise of evolutionary psychology essentially is that you have change across time. So you have an organism that is impacted by both its environment, which we would call natural selection, which is to say that there is variation between individuals within a species. Some of those variants are better able to survive than others, and those that are able to survive go on to reproduce more frequently, and thus the genes that make up that individual get passed on to the next generation. Okay. But in conjunction with natural selection, you also have sexual selection, which is essentially the mate choice of typically females shaping the genetic makeup of males. So a male would look a certain way or perform a certain behavior. And if that's attractive and desirable, then that male successfully mates and passes on those traits to the next generation. And you end up with this long chain of selection happening throughout evolutionary history. So when we look at men today, they are the product of essentially hundreds of millions of years of this evolutionary selection. And that shapes the types of behavior that people are likely to produce, that they're capable of producing. So yes, there's variation between individuals because genes vary, and thus you get variation quite substantially. But there's constraints in what's able to be performed by the genes a species possesses. That interacts with the environment you find yourself in. So cultures, for instance, changes in socioeconomic status, all of that interacts to produce really quite a complex behavior. Now you asked us, like, what is masculinity? Masculinity, I suppose, to some degree, would be the behavioral manifestation of traits which are ancestrally attractive. So if you think of the classic definitions of what masculinity are, strength, stoicism, the ability to lead, these all have very clear evolutionary origins. So if you look into tribal societies, for instance, so something much more similar to our evolutionary history, you find that men who are able to garner social support, have quite extensive social networks and power within those networks, are desired as mates. So it can be something like via warrior status, hunter status. So successful warriors, successful hunters are typically desired as mates. So classic traits that you might think of men. You bring that into the modern society, you still have all of those evolutionary pressures that have shaped that behavior across time, which is to say, many ancestors that were strong, that were able to outcompete mates, pass those genes and those traits on to the next generation. So you end up in a modern society, which is really complex, with a vastly changed social network defining what's acceptable and not. So for instance, a lot of the sort of classic masculine traits of strength and aggression and all that sort of stuff are not particularly popular in modern society. It's not conducive, at least to some degree, of a peaceful society. So you get this conflict really between the evolved traits that you possess and a social situation which tells you that those traits are undesirable. And there you get a lot of conflict around what the definition of masculinity is.
I think that's incredible how you described that. What did you say? Masculinity was the manifestation of behaviors that are ancestrally attractive.
Yeah, I mean, you might get some academics who will fundamentally disagree with that.
Yeah.
But it seems to be the case. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I give you a really let's say embarrassing example.
Yeah.
So one of me pet hobbies at the minute is Married at First Sight. I love that show, right? The psychology is amazing. And there, a lot, like, it's just started, and so sorry for any spoilers for anyone, but give Peter
a couple of seconds. Block your ears.
Yeah, block your ears for a second.
I like spoilers, carry on.
Yeah. So there, a lot of the women come in with what they desire in their men. And a lot of them this season have said specifically they want, quote, alphas who are confident, who are emotionally stable, in control of their emotions, all of this sort of stuff, right? while simultaneously also saying, I want something different, I want someone nice. So the judges, the experts pair these people up, and a lot of the women have been dissatisfied almost immediately with the men that they're paired with, because at least if you listen to them, they don't possess the masculine characteristics that they desire. Okay. That's despite stating they want something different. The reality is there's often a negative reaction to not having those states. So yeah, the conversation on masculinity is up in the air, but it seems intrinsically linked to what makes men, at least in part, desirable on the mating market.
Yeah, I'm interested in what, because obviously, probably typically throughout history, culture and society was relatively unchanged for vast swathes of time. And now, 10 years time, culture is very different. Yeah. Society is very different. And we get a media commentary on that now through social media. But typically throughout evolution, throughout history, I should say, civilization might not have changed huge amounts. And when they did, I guess the scale of time would have been millennia rather than decades. Yeah. So do you think now, when we look at how quick things change, do you think it's almost, there's no room for those evolutionary traits to catch up? So if we look at the balance of, maybe the last 150,000 years, let's say pre 2,500 years ago, the 150,000 years that preceded that, the very slow climb to agricultural level civilizations and, successful civilizations. But now we look at the last 80 years, last 100 years. Yeah. We are like a different race altogether. We're like a different species with different demands. Yeah. How do we think this is what's... Now we are completely outpacing, I think, yearly now. Yeah. We're completely outpacing the needs of I guess the wants and needs of a society, but also we're living in an almost a vestigial body that is still hardwired to enjoy those behaviours that ancestrally we...
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting question. This is, I think, one of the areas where a lot of my research sits. So yeah, I do think it's a big issue. So just to contextualize this a little bit, there's been a number of...
I love your contextualization.
Yeah, sorry, it's just because if I say it, it seems
so
like...
good.
It's so good. It's such a communication.
There's been a number of global studies which look across cultures on what, say, for instance, women find attractive, what men and women find attractive. And there's variance within cultures, but not actually that much. So, for instance, we see female mate selection driven by indicators of genetic quality. So that's things like facial symmetry, immune competence, height in men. There's some quite interesting studies that suggest that height and perceived formidability, so how strong men look, counts for a good percentage of what makes up male bodily attractiveness. But then you also have, so they would be indicators of gene quality. You also have indicators of parental investment ability. So things like income, stability, your social status, how kind you are, especially to children and those who rely on you. We know that these are globally important, right? If you look at, so that's a little bit of context there. If you look at the primary motivators of male mental health issues, so things like depression and suicide, they're typically things like income struggles, employability issues, loneliness, relationship breakdown. These are all fundamental to male reproductive success. Like if say, for instance, you lose your job, and you know that one of the primary assessors that women use to judge your mate quality, your mate value, is your ability to provision resources, that is not a comfortable place to be. And we know that the brain possesses both circuits that reward behavior that lead to reproductive success. It's part of the reason, for instance, why sex feels good, why flirting feels good, but also we possess systems that do the opposite, that disincentivize behaviors that negatively impact reproductive success. So it feels bad, for instance, if you say a joke to a group full of people and they look at you like you've said something really offensive.
Yeah.
Like it feels bad because it ancestrally would be related to impacting survival and reproductive success, essentially. So yeah, you see some quite interesting stuff around evolved male status contest, things like acquiring resources and social power and all that, and not having that impacting male mental health. I'm aware I've been talking for a little bit, but just one more point. If it's
No, it's really,
fine.
really it's really important.
In terms of changes to modern society, impacting these evolved systems, one of the things that we see, for instance, is a big increase in the number of women who are successful in education compared to men. Now, that's great. That's a good thing. But across educational levels, you see now women are on average more successful than men are in terms of education. That has impacts on things like your ability to earn, but it also impacts women as well. And this isn't a whataboutery thing. It impacts male mental health. So, for instance, one of the things that you see in female mate selection criteria is the selection for high quality men. So that would be men who are attractive, men who do have the ability to invest. And you see that reflected in, for instance, data which shows that women will select men who are at least equally educated to themselves, if not more. So there's an interesting Tinder study where women preferentially select highly educated men and men don't do that. But it also reflects in things like divorce statistics and relationship breakdowns where there's data that shows that if men earn less than women, that increases their likelihood of being divorced. So for instance, if men lose jobs, that increases relationship breakdown. So
Why
you,
do you know? Why do you think that is, Mark?
well,
Or
I
Becky?
think that,
You know, as a female as well, you know, why do you think this is?
so I think this is deep-seated mate selection criteria. So if you look at animals, for instance, and across sexually reproducing species, so not just ourselves and apes, but across species, females are highly selective over the males that they choose. And in part, that's because there's a lot of cost that comes with female reproduction that males just don't experience. So internal gestation, prolonged infant care typically is something that's borne by women, by females. I think it's about 5% of mammals have males that invest in offspring. We are one of those species, but for the most part across evolutionary history, it isn't the case. So for female evolution, it matters that you're really selective over the mates that you choose, and that trait gets built in. So as you, in society, as you raise women up, which is a good thing, just to be absolutely clear, like no confusion here, you also alter what constitutes an attractive, desirable man. So if you're judging attractiveness for, let's say, economic attractiveness based upon your own status and how men compete against other men, as you become equal, a smaller and smaller percentage of men become desirable, essentially. And you see that reflected in some quite interesting statistics. So one of my research interests is incels. So typically that would be men who aren't able to get access to reproductive relationships. But you also see female incels, and they tend to be older, really quite successful individuals who aren't able to find men who meet their standards, essentially. It's not that they can't find any man, it's that the standards they have make it really hard to gain access to relationships. So so in terms of modern changes, you end up with a lot of mismatch between both male and female evolved reproductive strategy and how that interacts with society. So a lot of strong competition that men experience, and a lot of negative emotions as a consequence of not being able to meet reproductive needs, for instance.
It's an incredible situation, really, isn't it? And I think probably the way our society is structured now as well probably lends itself to a situation that looks like it probably is going to be more and more exaggerated the further we go down. What's your experience, Becci, as a woman? You know, in this context, you know, what's your experience with social media and, you know, seeing all this play out from an academic perspective, but also a personal perspective?
I think you can see a lot of it in social media. For me, so you think about the environment that I was going to say grew up in there, but no, the ancestral environment, like hundreds of thousands and millions of years ago, right? We were these nomadic tribes, and our frame of reference was very small, and we evolved in groups of sort of 50 to 150 people, and we knew who everybody was in that group. Our biggest predator, biggest threat to our survival was people from other groups. So being able to identify different people who were one of us or not one of us, was something that was really important. You fast forward now to how we currently live. We tend to live far away from our families, far away from support network, and we rely increasingly on social media to kind of replace that, to bring us together. Whereas we would have been, you know, in close-knit circles before, we're now looking at social media. But it's no longer just a group of 50 to 150 people. You've got a global scale, and you're seeing not just the people who you know every day. And I mean, firstly, you're seeing people you know day to day, and they might be showing you snippets of their life on social media, and it might be just the highlight reel almost of the bits that they're doing well, which, even though you know it logically, it makes you feel like you need to live up to something. You need to hit all of these targets, tick all of these boxes to be able to be, quote unquote, a successful person or a successful parent or a successful partner or whatever. But it's not just the people that we know every day. It's all of, you know, celebrities, people who you may aspire to. They almost become part of your social group as such. So you're living up to these constant expectations, and I guess expectations that you can't fully live up to, you know, about like wealth and status, but then it impacts on, so not just you, so say as a man who you're expecting to have a certain level of physical fitness, mental fitness, intelligence, prestige, money, but you're now as a woman also looking for those certain levels of prestige, physical fitness, income, and, you know, to what you were speaking to before, there's a mismatch there. And I think it's kind of our own creation via social media. It's become amplified.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think social media has allowed maybe is the wrong word, but it's almost like humans are constantly evaluating the conditions for their worthiness in society.
Totally.
Constantly. And then social media has just not only amplified it, but it's expanded the highest strata of desirability and made it that is everybody's aim.
Yeah.
Everybody's aim is to be the 0.001%. When in reality that doesn't happen. You know, if you think how I grew up as a child, I met people in society. I went out to the park, I went out on the streets, and you just meet all kinds of people.
Yeah.
And you just take people as they are, and you understand that, okay, that's who I am to them. That's who I am to them. You fall out with people and you make friends.
Yeah.
But now, from a very young age, you are exposed to the ultimate version of desirability in society. That has to have an effect on us as men and us as women.
Yeah.
It must do.
Yeah.
And I think if, like you said, Mark, you know, this vision almost of what we are supposed to be like as men and women, it's almost like none of us can meet that standard, but we're all expected to.
I think there's something really important in that. And, you know, not just for men. So again, what you were talking about before, Mark, about kind of elevating women's kind of status and opportunities in society. And again, right, I mean, I'm all for it, right? Totally all for it. But I can remember I used to talk to my PhD supervisor about this, like this increase in pressure on you as a woman. When you're doing a PhD and you're trying to look after your children, and you know, for me at the time I was getting divorced, I'm trying to hold all of these things together. How do you manage to spin all of those plates simultaneously? And you know, back then people didn't do things like gym memberships, right? Whereas now everyone has a gym membership, right? And it's like you go to work and you go to the gym. What else are you fitting in your day after that? You go to work and you go to the gym. Like I don't have a gym membership, right? Because I can't think of how I can ever fit that in. And my youngest daughter's nearly 14 now. She's not a baby, but she's exhausting. And I'm taking her to the gym. And so I'm trying to be a good mum there. And I'm trying to be a good boss. And I'm trying to be a good colleague. And I'm trying to spin all of these plates. But because we've got more opportunities to do things, there's more expectations to have them. And there's almost this sort of looking down on people. So same for mothers, for example, if you choose to be a stay-at-home mum, like, oh, but you've got all these opportunities. You can go to work and you can do these things. Why would you choose to do that? Why wouldn't you choose to do that? But likewise, you know, you look at men and there's that kind of same thing there that, firstly, if they don't choose to stay at home, if they're not hands-on enough with their children, there's a bit of a stigma around it. But then for men who do choose to stay at home with their children and have their other halves go to work, there's almost a bit of stigma around that. Still, we haven't fully socially allowed that yet.
Yeah. I mean, there's data about that as well. I think there was an interesting study which surveyed women, asking how many of them would be happy for their partners to be stay-at-home dads. I think it was 5%. So really quite a small number. And again, like that makes sense, right? Evolutionarily, like in terms of what female mate preference is, in terms of how a status contest has evolved. It makes sense that you see that sort of stuff. But yeah, just to mirror what Becci's saying there, the social media side of it is hard. It's hard both because it sets standards, essentially. So if you imagine you grow up, you look at, in fact, I'll use a personal example. We were just talking about this earlier. So when I became a father, one of the things that the social media algorithm did was feed me lots of examples of fathers doing stuff perfectly, like getting their children up, perfectly dressed, making really complex foods with maintaining their gym lifestyle and everything. And I found that really, really difficult. And luckily, I'm aware of what the research shows. I'm aware that what you get on social media is an algorithm-driven, curated version of reality. And it still was hard to view that and not feel like you could be doing more. Or that there's something more out there. And in terms of the struggles that men experience, especially in the dating market, a lot of it, at least in part, is driven by that sort of stuff. So for instance, let's imagine you're a guy who's, let's say, 5'10" in height, right? Places you above average in height. Tinder have just announced that they're placing a height filtering option on Tinder, and we know how that works because there are other ones that do it. We tend to see women filter out men who are below 6 foot, and become increasingly selective towards men who are above 6 foot, right? I mean, it does two things. It means men lie more about their
was
height.
just gonna say that, yeah.
So-
There's going to be a lot of 5'11" men who are all of a sudden growing an inch overnight.
yeah, exactly. So probably affects women as well, where they meet up with guys and they're like, hold on a second, you said you were 6'2" and you're not. But also what it does mean is if you're, let's say you're a young guy, you have grown up on social media, you see women telling you what they want in men, you get onto social media, onto online dating, and you get nothing. And that's quite a common experience. It's men more than women struggle on online dating. Various reasons for that. Various different studies that show it. But it's a hard place to exist.
Yeah.
And essentially what you've got there is entire cities worth of people you're sifting through, and you select the best. And that means a lot of people lose out.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
In a way they wouldn't do previously. So that's a mating-specific context, but it also exists for everything else. I mean, if you're judging your socioeconomic success, your social status, and all you see is people driving around in Bugattis and with private planes and surrounded by parties and all that all the time, it does nothing but enhance the feeling of failure and enhance the loneliness that you see in modern society now, especially for young men who are, I think, the loneliest they've ever been.
It's like almost, if you remember in primary school when you'd be trying to play football and you're getting, everyone gets picked for the team.
Yeah.
There's always the last kid who gets picked.
Yeah.
It's almost like we're just creating, like that's what society's becoming, but nobody's good enough for the team.
Yeah.
You know, instead of it being one person left, there's 10 people left and one kid's good enough.
Yeah.
And it's like we're all standing there going, well, that's where we need to be, but we can't get there.
Yeah.
Can't get there. I'm really interested in, especially with the work that we're involved in, is how do you combat this? So, you know, we live in the world we live in, and it's not going to change anytime soon. Well, it is going to change, but not in the way that we're talking about, and that's going to be beneficial. So, how do we combat it? Do we go back to first principles and just say, okay, to make ourselves have the best chance of feeling positive and feeling desirable and feeling like we're enough, we go back to, you know, looking after ourselves physically? Do we try and do all these things that are ancestrally things that would have meant positive outcomes? Or do we try and say, I'm going to become a modern man and I'm going to try, even though maybe it's biologically that doesn't fit, to fit the world I'm living in? How do you combat that?
Yeah, I think it's a really tricky question, and that's so just to be clear, one of the issues that we have, and that's why we do what we do, we reach out to, you know, people like yourselves, is we exist very theoretically. So we have the data, but quite often it's never really applied. So the bridge between what you do at a university and the actual impact of it is very much up for debate at the minute. And I think there's an element of caution, because so evolutionary drivers prioritize reproductive success. Okay, and that's not necessarily directly, it's through a lot of the behaviors which ancestrally would have led to reproductive success, and not all of those behaviors are desirable. So for instance, aggression absolutely is in benefit of male reproductive success, but you don't want to go out in society and sort of beat the hell out of any potential competition, right? It works in the animal kingdom. It's not really what we want to bring into society. So there's an element of caution with bringing evolutionary thinking to practical impact. But I do think that the things that create status, the things that are rewarded biologically in so doing, are really good ways of tackling male mental health crises. Like, for instance, I know you guys, Space Northeast, I mean, it's a bit of an old example, but I think it's such a good one. You took people into, I think it was a care home, where you redesigned the garden in that area, right? that is pro-social. It benefits the group at large, which are things which ancestrally would have been rewarding.
Working as a group as well.
Working as a group, yeah. So you build relations with your peers. And we know for men, that sort of group work is a source of mental health well-being. And like, if I might be a little bit flippant with it, it looks pretty good on a dating profile. Like, you go out, you help people, you're pro-social. These are the sorts of things that people select for. And
It's a parenting indicator, really, isn't it?
yeah,
Kind
exactly.
of thing.
if you're pro-social and you're willing to help, that is indicative of someone who's likely to be a good parent figure.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's rewarded reproductively. And it doesn't have to be massive. So, like, for instance, if you look at the likes of say, Andrew Tate, who has a massive influence over young men, he promotes male reproductive success via things like wealth acquisition, via things like promotion of dominance tactics, which do work to some degree, even though they're not socially desirable. But it's really hard to achieve that, right? Like, not many people can buy a Bugatti and fly around, right? But smaller scale social stuff, like what you guys do, I think it works. It gives status, it builds group connections, so that tackles the loneliness thing, creates a social support system. And if you tie that together with promoting economic success, which again, challenging to do, but if you tie that together, then I think you have a good recipe for at least decent male mental health.
Yeah.
Although there is a caveat there in that we have this really awful evolved system that feels good when you initially does something, but adapts to that goodness quite quickly.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So you end up constantly chasing more.
It's the disappearing horizon, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I'm aware of that in my own personality and the way I live.
Yeah.
You know, when you strive for something, like people will come up to me and say, "Space is amazing," but then for me, I'm like, well, I haven't done anything yet. And it's like, because your brain is constantly just going, okay, what is next? What is next? What is next? So I guess to wrap up, I would like to know from both of you, what is, and this is a really hard question because you don't know the answer, what is the future for men?
Do you wanna tackle that one first, Becky?
I do not. Do you want to?
What does it look like? Because I know how it feels, and I do think there's a lot of positive strides being made, but especially the elephant in the room here is social media and the digital age that we live in is negatively impacting our social relations.
Yeah.
And social cohesiveness, social mobility. We've got a social health problem rather than a mental health problem. I honestly feel like mental health is just a symptom of our social health problem at the minute. I really feel that way.
Makes sense.
So where does that go? I know how it feels, but from you guys and your academic perspective.
Yeah, I think it's God, I'm going to sound really negative here. I don't intend to, right? Yeah. I think there's a lot of challenges on the horizon. So, for instance, the likely trajectory is that women continue to outpace men in the education sector. And in conjunction with that, changes to things like AI development, automation, impacts quite a lot of the sort of manual labour job that, especially in places like Sunderland, for instance, a lot of guys do. So you end up with increasing the amount of stress that comes along with employment success. You end up increasing the difficulty that comes along with reproductive success as well. So I do think there's a lot of challenges on the horizon. I think also that people do become more savvy with social media technology. I also think there's some quite interesting generational changes. So for instance, one of the big impacts on male suicide is alcohol consumption. And I think young people now are much less likely to consume alcohol the same way older generations are. So you get a lot of social change, which at least to some degree mitigates that sort of stuff.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And I think people get more savvy with social media technology. But I do think it's hard. I do think there is an increasing amount of attention being placed upon male mental health and male success. Like, for instance, even though not successful, there's been a lot of calls recently to create a minister for men. I think it got rejected by the current government. But you see that sort of thing increasing in number. And I also think that you see a lot of men turning to social media for the group connections that they just don't have anymore.
Yeah.
There are pros and cons to doing that. It can lead to a little bit of extrematization. So if you look at like the incel community, for instance, you see that there. But I think if we can raise awareness of how social media works, of how it manipulates evolved tendencies, and promote a lot of the sort of grassroots stuff that you're doing, then it is potentially hopeful in a really challenging environment, I think.
I think it will be, because I think social connection is going to become our most valuable commodity.
Yeah.
You know, in an age where we're going to grow up with AI,
Yeah.
I'm going to grow up with a digital age. How valuable is genuine social connection going to be?
Yeah.
And that's why everything we do is in person, and
Yeah.
it always will be. Everything
Yeah.
is in person.
That's the thing, you know, you think about even, so when the pandemic hit and we just all pivoted online teaching, and we were like, yeah, well, this is going to be easy. We're just doing the same as what we do in a room, but virtually. And it was not. I think it showed everybody a Teams meeting isn't the same as a face-to-face meeting. You miss so much communication, non-verbal communication. There's something different about being in a place with somebody that you just don't get. So yeah, I think Mark said everything there much more eloquently than I can, because I think it is going to be really challenging. It almost feels like the way things are going, we're setting things up for failure, setting it up for a disaster or something, and it's it's things like this, like space, that I think is going to be really pivotal in counteracting those developments. You know, the increase in social media use, AI use, you're taking away those social connections and the purpose, like Mark said there, about the automation of a lot of the manual roles and stuff. And I know you've spoke about the deindustrialization in Sunderland and the kind of lack of purpose and how that's contributed to the negative mental health in a lot of people. And you can see it happening again in another generation. And so you see these external shifts, and I get it. I get why the external shifts are happening, but sometimes I just think humans generally, we don't do ourselves any favours. You see how we've kind of artificially manufactured a lot of quote unquote solutions to evolved tendencies, you know, so like how we evolved to crave fat, salt and sugar because they were so rare in an ancestral environment, and now we've got an obesity problem.
Yeah.
You know, we create these things, something like making yourself physically and mentally uncomfortable to strive and achieve something feels unpleasant at first. But it's the pay, it's what you pay to achieve that reward of success and gratification at the end of it. And I think there's so much now in the younger generation, you know, my kids' ages, where they don't want to achieve that now. They don't want to push themselves through that. They just want the easy life. They just want to take it away. So finding a way to get people motivated to dig deep, to be able to achieve, I think is something that's going to be really important for mental health going forward.
It's such an important point, because I think just before we finish, I just wanted to say that what you've just mentioned there is so powerful, because if we think about how we grew up as young people, what we used to watch I used to watch cartoons, which would be on once a week, and I knew what time and date they were on.
Oh yeah.
I would read a book or get read to,
Yeah.
listen to music by picking a CD out of a shelf.
Yeah.
and listening to the album as a whole. Where now we've sacrificed all that for convenience.
Yes.
And now kids are going to grow up on a phone where 6 seconds is their attention span, rather than however long it takes to read a book, or however long it takes to read an album, or waiting a week to see a new episode of a cartoon they loved. We've changed the playing area
Yeah.
drastically. We've shrunk it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be so hard for people to find that the appreciation for that delayed gratification, because it's such a good point. Becci, Mark, thank you so much. You've been
Thanks
amazing.
for having us.
No problem.
Been absolutely amazing, and I feel like I genuinely could talk to you for the next 3 hours. And we'll have you back.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
absolutely.
Appreciate it.
No
Anytime.
problem.
All right. Cool. Thanks, guys. And thank you as well to Audio Arcade Studio for providing us with this amazing studio for our next series of Space to Think podcasts.